Hey guys, welcome to the inaugural episode of the Golden State with Mates podcast. My name is Peter O'Keefe. I am the site editor for Fansided's Blue Man Hoop, offering daily coverage of the Golden State Warriors, which is what I plan to expand on here with this new podcast, hoping to record new episodes at least 3 times a week. Bit of a weird time coming into the off season, but it's been a huge for the last fortnight or so for the Golden State Warriors, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of insight and analysis to provide you guys with, hopefully, over the off-season and into what will be a massive 2023-24 season for the Warriors. If you can't tell already, I am Australian, so I'm planning on hopefully offering a unique voice to Warrior coverage, which I already try and do on Blue Man Hoop. This will be Warrior focused primarily. However, looking forward to getting guests on from across the world that cover a range of different teams that can help provide a little bit of coverage on other teams as well as we go along. Stay tuned for this episode, though. We're going to be doing a Summer League recap of the Warriors' loss to the New Orleans Pelicans, and I'll also be diving into my own thoughts on the Warriors' recent acquisitions of Dario Saric over the weekend, and before that, Cory Joseph, and of course, Chris Paul as well in that blockbuster trade. So we are about an hour removed from the end of the Warriors' 4th Summer League game, their second in Las Vegas against the New Orleans Pelicans, a 94-86 loss. A little bit disappointing after holding a 7-point lead at halftime. The Pelicans went on a 14-2 run through the middle to late stages of the third quarter. The Warriors kind of re-established themselves in the fourth quarter. The game was tied with a few minutes remaining, but the Pelicans ran away in the end with the 8-point win. Look, there's been 3 key players that I've been focusing on, and I'm sure many Warrior fans have been focusing on through these 4 Summer League games to date. Really looking at a lens through Golden State and their roster for the 2023-24 season. So we're obviously talking about the 19th overall pick in Brandin Podziemski and potential two-way guys. Firstly, Lester Quinones, who's been really impressive, and also Brazilian Gui Santos, who has a few more contractual difficulties on a two-way next season, but he could potentially join Quinones on a two-way. So let's go through them first up. So we'll start with Lester Quinones, a 26-point performance today, really impressive, especially in the first half. 26 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, couple of steals in there as well. 8 of 17 from the field, 4 of 10 from three-point range, and 6 of 8 from the free throw line. 16 of his points came in the first half, including a stretch in that second quarter, late in that second quarter, where he had a series of triples. Really got the Warrior offense going after a pretty slow start for both teams. I mean, the Warriors led 22-21 after the opening period, despite shooting just 30% from the floor. He was really electric. He has been. His first game in Vegas wasn't overly efficient, 15 points, 5 for 15 shooting, I think it was. But this was a performance from him where he got back to his quality work, both on the ball and off the ball. Look, there's been a lot of comparisons between him and the recently departed Jordan Poole. Now, I don't think anyone's saying that Quinones is going to become the player that Poole has over the last couple of seasons, but there's certainly similarities with his ability to play both on and off the ball. He's a pure shooter. That's simply the case. He's 4 of 10 from deep today. He's shown a real capacity not only to be a high-level three-point shooter, percentage-wise, but also in terms of taking a high volume and really difficult deep ones as well. So Quinones has been really impressive. I really like his capacity to run the floor in transition. He had a layup to open the second half, which really proved to me that this isn't a guy who's necessarily just looking for three-point shots in the half court, but he's also willing to run in transition, spot up, or run the floor and get to the rim for a layup. He had an and one in the final 90 seconds today, which was impressive, and I think that's going to be the continuation of his development, is being able to do things with the ball in his hands. I'm not sure he's quite got the first step that Jordan Poole necessarily does, but a lot of Jordan Poole's stuff off the dribble also led to turnovers and being out of control. So I think for Quinones, it's about being able to develop that side of his game, maintaining control, being able to get to the rack efficiently, and being able to finish as well, because I think he does have some chops being able to finish around the rim. At the moment, he's more of just a shooter primarily, but there's certainly some work on and off the ball that is quite impressive, and I think the Warriors will be lucky to be able to retain him on a two-way contract. I wouldn't be surprised with how he's performed. 3 20-point outings in his first 4 games of Summer League here. I wouldn't be surprised if a team tries to chase him on a 15-man roster with a standard NBA contract. I think the Warriors being able to retain him on a two-way would be an absolute steal, and they'd be fortunate to do so. So we'll wait and see what happens there if another team potentially comes calling at the end of Summer League here in Vegas. And yeah, it'll be interesting. Should the Warriors have that pressure, will they put him on a standard contract on the 15-man roster? I doubt it at this point. However, he's clearly been the most impressive player thus far in Summer League, that's for sure. Brandin Podziemski, 19th overall pick, a really up and down performance from him today. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of not so good. Near triple-double, which is what he's kind of self-proclaimed himself as. After he got taken by the Warriors in his introductory press conference, he viewed himself as a triple-double guy in the NBA in a few years' time. And well, we saw that today with 10 points, 9 rebounds, and 10 assists. However, what we've seen from Russell Westbrook over the time is that triple-doubles aren't necessarily the most impactful analysis, I guess, of a game and how a player's performed, because Podziemski here, as I said, a near triple-double, but 3 of 16 from the field wasn't overly impressive scoring-wise, that is for sure. And I think for him, patience is just really key. He took 7 shots in the opening period, and a lot of them were forced, in my opinion. He's really more so a playmaker than he is actually a scorer, I think, at this point, which is going to create a weird dynamic for the Warriors in terms of the potential of him getting minutes next season, because they don't need another point guard. They've got Steph Curry, they've got Chris Paul, they've just acquired Cory Joseph as well. So you don't necessarily need another guy who will have the ball in his hands primarily, because he just won't next season. He will play more of an off-ball, potentially catch and shoot role if he is to earn minutes as a rookie next season. But right now in Summer League, he's playing the point guard position. He's bringing the ball up. He's handling it. He's really shown glimpses as a playmaker. There's no doubt about that. He had 10 assists today. He's had other games where he probably could have had 7, 8 plus assists if his teammates were actually finishing layups or shots from the perimeter. That's what really got me today, was the amount of layups that were missed, not by just the Warriors, but the Pelicans as well. I mean, it was real Summer League standard, let's put it that way. But I've been impressed with Podziemski. If you were happy with the selection when the Warriors took him at 19, there's certainly no need to go against that, I guess, and create too many major calls on where his future lies. But I guess the main question for me now, and even heading into the draft previously, was what's his elite skill at the professional level? And right now, it's probably his rebounding, which he likes to say 6'6" on Twitter, but he's more so 6'4", 6'5", potentially even smaller than that at 6'2", 6'3". Is rebounding necessarily the skill set that you want to be known for at that size? No, not particularly. So I like it. It's valuable. It's impactful. The fact that he can grab boards and then he can push the ball in transition is a valuable part of the NBA game. There's no doubt about that. However, what else is he bringing to the table from an elite skill set? He shot 43.8% with Santa Clara last season in college. that hasn't been able to translate just yet, although it's only early days. We can't take... we've got to take some of these things as a grain of salt, that's for sure. Is he a guy that is able to get to the rim and finish efficiently around the rim? Not so much at this stage. Again, today I thought the Pelicans did a really good job of bottling him up once he got into the paint and often forcing him into tough shots or forcing him to kick it out onto the perimeter. So defensively, he clearly tries on defense, which is a start. That's for a lot of NBA players. That is the first step, and he tries on defense, which is a good starting point. However, there's some athletic issues there, which is not only a defensive thing in terms of point of attack defense and being able to stay in front of guys, but in terms of offensively as well. With his quick first step, can he actually blow by guys? Which has been a question mark. It was a question mark for me today as well. There are a lot of times where he had some pretty contested layup attempts at the rim simply because he wasn't able to burst by his defender off the dribble. So while he can be a good team defender at this point, while he's more than willing to put his body on the line, he took a couple of charges today. That's great. Point of attack wise, there are a couple of times where players blew by him, and that was a bit of an area of weakness for him today, and I think so far during Summer League. Again, going forward in these last few games, I think the patience is really the key. Not forcing shots and really being what he's asked to do in this offense at the moment, where Quinones is more the scorer, same with Guy Santos, and he's the primary playmaker, and it would be great to see him get a couple more double-digit assist games, especially with only 2 turnovers as well, because that's been another slight issue, as it has been for the whole team, which has been a funny thing because the Golden State turnover issue seems to have extended to their Summer League team. And Podziemski has kind of been the catalyst in that. I think the other on Friday had 5 turnovers, I believe, in that opening game in Vegas. So to see 10 assists today and only 2 turnovers is a really positive sign, that is for sure. Guy Santos is the last one. He's been really impressive. He's 25 points on Friday night, really efficient from the field, has come back a much better player than what we saw with Santa Cruz last season. He was a little bit quieter today against the Pelicans. Only 13 points, 3 rebounds. A little more inefficient, 3 for 9 from the floor. His 3-point shot wasn't falling, just 1 for 5. Doris Burke on the coverage described his play as decisive, and I think that's what we've seen so far through the opening 4 games. I really like some of the stuff he's doing both on the ball and off the ball. He had a dunk in the opening quarter where Quinones beat his defender off the dribble, forced help, and Santos had a perfectly timed weak side cut from the baseline for that. So he's doing some really good work off the ball, but then on the ball as well, he's actually shown some ability to put the ball on the floor and get to the rim. He's a really nice size, obviously. I think he uses his strength well in the post. He's been able to get to the free throw line in multiple games here. He was 6 of 6 from the free throw line again today. So not only the ability to be able to get there, but the ability to capitalize once he does. So that's been impressive. I just think the Warriors need to get this guy on a 2-way deal for next season. Now, is he going to be as impactful? Like, is he going to come in and play 50-plus games and then be put on a standard contract like Anthony Lamb was last season? No, but in terms of developing a young player who could really become a wing forward option for the Warriors in future years, I think it is well worthwhile. I think the Warriors, with their the acquisition of Dario Saric, for example, on the weekend, I think they've got to a point now where they've got at least 10 players that are going to be in the rotation next season. I don't necessarily think that they are going to need their 2-way guys as much as they did with Anthony Lamb and Ty Jerome last season. And if they do, then I think that's more where Quinones comes into play more so than Santos. So I think we could get him on a 2-way here with the Warriors. I think we could see him suit up for some odd games here and there a little bit, and obviously in garbage time, but primarily continuing to play in Santa Cruz, continuing to develop his game, because the jump he's made from this summer league to what from last summer league to what we've seen this summer league has been really impressive. And if he continues along at that rate, then potentially in 12 months' time, we see a guy who's ready to be on a full NBA contract on the 15-man roster and part of Steve Kerr's rotation. So looking forward to seeing how he develops over the coming months, over the off-season and into training camp, and whether he can earn himself a two-way deal if that's the path that he and the Warriors want to go down. We'll take a quick break here, and next up we'll get into a few of the Warriors' acquisitions so far throughout the offseason. Obviously, we had the big one with Dario Saric over the weekend, and before that, Cory Joseph and Chris Paul. So let's move back from most recent here, right? So it was a long time coming, but the Warriors finally got their hands on Dario Saric over the weekend after over a week of speculation regarding his future. Of course, I think it was NBC Sports' Monty Poole in the lead up to free agency that reported that the Warriors were most likely to land Saric in free agency, and eventually it has become the case, despite some rumours and speculation about his potential fit with the Miami Heat, depending on the Damian Lillard trade, if that does eventually go through. Can't underestimate the importance of this signing for the Warriors. And I tweeted it out on immediately after the news. I tweeted out, look, it's a little bit sad that we've got to a point where a player like Dario Saric, who is a role player, actually means this much to the fans as a signing. But that's what it is when the Warriors only have minimum contracts available. Like, that's what you've got to work with. And to be able to get a player who, it's not just him as a player, but it's how he fits with this Warriors system that I think is going to be really, really good and really, really effective. So there's obvious comparisons with the different front court players that the Warriors have had over the past couple of seasons. And we know how desperate they were to find a three-point shooting forward / small ball five in this system over the last 12 months. Because after the loss of Otto Porter Jr. and Nemanja Bjelica, the Warriors brought in JaMychal Green, and he had a really up and down season, not helped with a couple of injury and health issues. However, I don't think anyone expected him to be starting games in the second round of the postseason, given his form throughout the course of last season. And it simply came down to the fact the Warriors were desperate for someone with a three-point shot who also has the size to be able to kind of pinpoint the gap between trying to prioritize offense and not having two non-four spaces out there in Draymond Green and Kevon Looney, but also not delving right into a three-guard lineup of what was then Jordan Poole, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson, and trying to squeeze the gap with a guy that could provide that three-point shooting, but also not affect them size-wise and defensively. And look, I give credit to JaMychal Green for how he performed during that second-round series, coming off a season where his playing time and his opportunity was really up and down. But ultimately, he as a player wasn't the perfect fit with the Warriors. He's a very athletic type. He can, how many times did we see kind of surprising putback dunks, or not putback dunks, but just explosive finishes at the rim last season? I think he shot 37% from three last season. Like, he's a decent three-point shooter. However, him as a player, his IQ, his passing ability, his ability to put the ball on the floor isn't what the Warriors really want from that kind of position. And that's what they're getting here in Dario Saric. So I'm not saying that Dario Saric is a completely massive upgrade specifically as a player over JaMychal Green, but specifically for this Warriors system, I think he certainly is. Now, if we go back to the season before the championship year, obviously in 2021-22, they've got Otto Porter Jr. and Nemanja Bjelica, and there's been comparisons there between those two players. I think he's somewhere in between in terms of what kind of impact we're going to see from him next season. I think it's impossible to expect an Otto Porter Jr. level of output from him. Otto was a starting and closing player for the Warriors in their best lineup in the NBA Finals, for goodness sake. Like, it just goes so under the radar how important and how good he was for the Warriors. It's a real shame now that he's had injury troubles in Toronto, but my goodness, was that one of the best one-year signings the Warriors have had over the past decade. Absolutely unbelievable, and I think to expect the same out of Saric would be pretty unfair. They're also different kind of players as well. I don't think, Otto was more of a 4 that could potentially play small ball 5, but not really. It was more that 4-5 combo with Draymond. Saric is probably going to be similar, but as we've seen in his latest stint with the Oklahoma City Thunder, where he was primarily a small ball 5, and I think that's what he's going to be in the Warrior system. So he's more going to play the Bielitsa role. However, I think he's closer to his prime, although he is coming off an ACL injury 2 years ago. I think he's closer to his prime than what Bielitsa was when he was with the Warriors. And we've got to remember, Bielitsa, he copped a lot of flack from Warrior fans across that season. I mean, it all ended rosy because they won the championship, and he actually had some good minutes in the finals. Especially, he became this Jason Tatum stopper out of nowhere. But that whole season, he copped a lot of flack for being in the rotation in the first place, and I'll never forget this, for giving up a plethora of open threes and instead trying to be this Nikola Jokic type who puts the ball on the floor and facilitates for others, when every fan is pulling their hair out saying, any chance to shoot an open 3. This is what you're here for, do it. And he didn't. So I think Saric will be somewhere in between, but he is that kind of Bielitsa, a 4-5 who can shoot the 3, who can put the ball on the floor and can play make, which I think in the Warrior system is going to be really important. And it's an element that, as I said, JaMychal Green didn't have last season. He will be the backup 5, I think, behind Kevon Looney, but he's also going to have, I think, plenty of minutes alongside Draymond Green as a 4-5 combination and alongside even Looney as a 4-5 combination. I think post-ACL and even pre-ACL, there's some issues with Saric athletically in terms of guarding power forwards out on the perimeter. We know in modern NBA, most power forwards are now kind of wing types who spend most of their time out on the perimeter. And I think that's where Saric may struggle a little bit if he's playing large minutes at power forward. But, I mean, that's where he's played across the course of his career. So according to Basketball Reference, 81% of his time on an NBA floor has been as a power forward. However, as I said, his latest in OKC, when he was traded mid-season after 37 games with the Suns, his 20 games with OKC, he was basically solely a small ball center, which I think is what we're going to see with the Warriors and in Steve Kerr's system. He is a decent three-point shooter, and this is what we're going to get with him. Now, yes, you could say JaMychal Green shot 37% last season. I think Warrior fans are going to feel a lot more confident every time that Dario Saric takes a three-point attempt, whether it's in a pick-and-pop game with Chris Paul, or also, I mean, he shot 44.8% on corner threes last season. So if he is playing more as a power forward or even as a small ball 5, regardless, he can just sit in the corner on offense, space the floor, and as I said, 44.8% from the corner last season. So they could use him in a variety of different ways. Obviously, he's got that history with Chris Paul in their time at the Suns. So that second unit should be productive offensively with him. As I said, pick and pop, potential pick and roll. He can make decisions going downhill. So looking forward to seeing what he can incorporate there. He shot 56.5% from within 10 feet last season, which is like 10 feet's a little bit kind of thing. And I think it's really important that he finished well at the rim, because in the pick and roll game with Chris Paul, if your spacing is efficient on the outside, I think there's going to be a lot of instances where defenses will collapse and he'll be able to use his passing ability to find open shooters. But if they start making them, then I think teams will automatically say, we'll play straight up. Saric on the roll will make him a scorer in that situation. And so for him to be able to finish effectively and efficiently at the rim, I think is going to be really important. Overall, though, like realistically, he's the 10th man in the rotation, but that's a bloody good 10th man to have. And I think it's going to be a really impactful 10th man as well. There are going to be certain games where he might play 25 minutes. There are going to be other games where he plays 10 minutes. It's all going to be situational depending on how he's going, who they're playing against. There's clearly going to be a high diet still of Draymond at center minutes. There's no doubt about that. But I think Saric is going to be really impactful. And again, as I said at the start, you can't underestimate the impact of this signing to a team that desperately needed the kind of skill set that he brings. So, Cory Joseph, I think, is a nice signing. I don't think anyone's arguing that he's going to be the difference between being a championship team or not, that's for sure. And it's clear that the Warriors' initial preference was with Ty Jerome because they tendered him a qualifying offer there that he ultimately didn't take up and ended up signing a 2-year deal with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So, good luck to Ty on that. But I think Jerome's a nice replacement, and it's kind of much for muchness between those two, as I said. Either way, Jerome or Joseph, neither is being a huge contributor to the team necessarily. However, I do want to say that I think it's unfair to simply expect that Joseph will be a third-string point guard and will only get minutes if Stephen Curry and or Chris Paul are out of the lineup. I think that's unfair because, to me, he is the prototypical Steve Kerr type of guard, and I think he can play minutes next to Steph and or next to Chris Paul in the same backcourt. Now, do I think he's going to be playing every game? No, not really. However, just don't be surprised if he's actually, especially if he has a strong training camp, if he actually comes in and actually plays 10, 15 minutes a game next to CP3 and next to Steph Curry in different lineups. So that primarily, I think, comes from the fact that he can be an off-ball threat. He was 41.4% on catch-and-shoot threes last season, so he's not necessarily a guy that has to be solely a playmaking point guard who has to have the ball in his hands to be effective. I think he can play off the ball, albeit his lack of size does make him a bit of a liability defensively, which is why you're not going to see extended minutes with him on the floor next to Steph or CP3. But he's a Kerr style of player, as I said. He was 8th in assist-to-turnover ratio last season. I think Chris Paul was 3rd and Kevon Looney was 4th. This is a Warrior team that led the league in turnovers last season with over 16 a game. It is clear here from these off-season moves that they are trying to put in place a team that can mesh together and can get their offense up and running to a point where it is efficient and effective without having these lapses of concentration and lapses of periods where they go through turning the ball over with really silly and dumb plays. And that's what we saw at times last season. And let's be simple. They lost a lot of games last season simply by their horrific turnover differential compared to opposing teams. They cost themselves maybe 4 or 5 games throughout the regular season because of that. And we know they play, high motion, fast paced offense, and that is going to be more susceptible to turnovers. But I think bringing in Chris Paul, bringing in Cory Joseph, they're really trying to rectify that and limit it as much as possible. So, as I said, don't be too surprised if Cory Joseph is actually in the rotation at some point during next season, especially I think playing next to Steph, because that gives him an opportunity potentially to not just play off the ball, but also have maybe a 3-4 minute period potentially where Steph's just running around like a maniac off screens. And Cory Joseph is actually the primary point guard in that situation, and Steph's playing more of an off-ball role there. So looking forward to seeing what Cory Joseph can provide for the Warriors next season. The Warriors' biggest acquisition, obviously, over the last month was Chris Paul, the draft day trade that sent Jordan Poole, Patrick Baldwin Jr., and Ryan Rollins to the Washington Wizards. Look, my initial reaction to it, I was a little bit pessimistic simply because the optics of giving up a 24-year-old young, explosive guard who has shown the capacity to be a key member of a championship team. And also, despite a turbulent year last season, let's not forget, Poole did average over 20 points during the regular season. So to give that up for a 38-year-old Chris Paul was a little bit negative for me to begin with. However, the more I analyze it and the more I dive into it, the more I can see why the Warriors have done this from an on-court aspect in terms of what Chris Paul can give them next season, as opposed to what Jordan Poole would have. Make no mistake, this is an off-court move more than anything to open up the financial flexibility. You get off a guy who was on a 4-year, $128 million contract, and you bring in a guy who is on 1 year, $30.8 million and has a non-guaranteed $30 million the following season, which Chris Paul would have to win Sixth Man of the Year, and he would have to help lead the Warriors to another title, I think, in order to be able to get that $30 million contract in 2024-25. Otherwise, the Warriors will waive him, and they will either try and negotiate a new contract with him, or they will let him walk in free agency. That is as simple as that. I'd be shocked if they keep they keep Chris Paul around on $30 million in the 2024-25 season. In terms of the on-court aspect, though, for Chris Paul, clearly the biggest dynamic here is going to be the differing play styles between the Golden State Warriors and what they've done over the last decade under Steve Kerr, as opposed to Chris Paul and the heavy pick-and-roll style that he plays. Now, a lot of people have kind of said, well, he's going to be running the second unit, he's going to be the sixth man, he's going to have control of that, and therefore they can just play two different styles. No, that's not how it works. This is a team, one team, not two separate teams. This is one team. And so for me, Chris Paul is going to have to delve into the Warriors style, the faster pace, high motion offense of the Warriors. But also the Warriors and Steve Kerr will have to ingratiate a little bit more pick and roll style that Chris Paul runs into the offense as well. So it's to work effectively, there's going to have to be a meeting in the middle of the various styles, because asking the team as a whole to play two different styles depending on if Chris Paul's on the floor or not is just stupid. Like it is. Like Jonathan Kuminga's having a hard enough time trying to pick up the Warriors style of basketball, let alone saying to him, oh, when Chris Paul's out there, you play this style, and when everyone else is out there and you're with Steph Curry, you play this. Like that's not tenable. Like you have to meet in the middle somewhere between the differing styles. What I do have optimism about, though, is the fact that I think Chris Paul's shown an ability to be adaptable throughout his whole career. And yes, he plays a certain kind of way, but I think that is malleable enough within any kind of offense. And he spoke today about the fact that it's not brain surgery, it's basketball. And he knows basketball. And I think his experience and what he's been through throughout his career, there is optimism there that he will be able to fit into more of a Warriors-style basketball. I think the biggest thing about this from an on-court perspective is just the kind of safety net that Chris Paul brings the Warriors, rather than the up and down turbulent style of Jordan Poole, which could net you 30 points on any given night, but could also net you a 10-point, 3 for 15 shooting night with 6 turnovers. Chris Paul is going to be a lot more consistent. There's no doubt about that. And I think there's a safety net there that he gives the Warriors, so they're not going to be forced into a situation like they were last season where their bench flat out stunk and they needed Draymond Green to come in and be that safety net, to be that experienced leader, to play alongside Jordan Poole. They're not going to need that now with Chris Paul there. The other thing about Chris Paul, he has made every single team that he has joined better immediately. That includes the 2019-20 Oklahoma City Thunder, who had a better record with him and a young brass around him with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander leading that. They had a better record in that season than the season before, when they were led by Russell Westbrook and Paul George, who were all-stars. So Chris Paul, his ability to make teams better straight away. The Phoenix Suns, sure, they had a great finish in the bubble in Orlando in that same season, but they immediately became a finals team once Chris Paul entered the fold. Now, he's not going to have the same responsibility and necessarily the same impact on the Warriors as he did those teams, simply because he's not going to have the opportunity to. Like, he's coming in as, I think he will be the sixth man. I think he has to be the sixth man. He's probably going to play 25 minutes. He's not going to be your lead point guard, primary playmaker that's playing 30 to 35 minutes a game. He's not going to be that. However, I think his track record of making every team better that he's ever been on, I think at this point, 18 years into his career, we need to have that's valid. That is a valid point that I think is worth discussing and worth pointing out when you are thinking of why this Chris Paul move to the Warriors will actually work come next season. And I think that's important to acknowledge that this guy, even though he's never won an NBA championship, he is a winner. Like, he is a winner. He, as I said, and I can't overstate the point enough, every team he's been to, he has made better straight away. Looking at last season from the Phoenix Suns, there's a few elements there that I think can transition to the Warriors, which again is provides an optimistic outlook. So he averaged 4.4 three-point attempts last season, which was his highest since the 2018-19 season with that Houston Rockets team next to James Harden, who put up threes after threes after threes. And really, I mean, if we say the Warriors revolutionized the game with the three-point shot, I think the Rockets were just as much a part of that as well in that era with Harden and then those couple of years with CP as well. He shot 37.5% from three last season. That's solid enough, for sure. 55.1% of his three-point attempts last season were assisted, so they were catch-and-shoot attempts. That was his highest since the 2008-09 season. So, again, the adaptability of Chris Paul, I think, there's a lot more adaptability there than what some people, I think, give him credit for. That is for sure. But Chris Paul, I think he can come in. I think I said before about sixth man of the year. I think he can be sixth man of the year if he stays fit and healthy, which is not going to necessarily be the be-all and end-all in the regular season. It's about getting Chris Paul healthy at the right time of the year come the playoffs, which he hasn't been able to do in previous seasons. Again, he's not going to be asked to play 30, 35 minutes a game. He's going to be asked to play 20, 25 spot role. I'm looking forward to him playing alongside Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. I think it will work. The more I think about it, the more I think it will work. Is there still a chance that he gets traded maybe even before the season starts and the Warriors say, no, we don't want a guard there. We want to get a player, an OG Anunoby type or a wing forward kind of thing that would better fit our needs. Maybe there's a chance of that still happening. But from everything we're hearing, Chris Paul is a Golden State Warrior, will be a Warrior next season. They're going to try this out. And I think it's going to be more effective than, say, when they brought in D'Angelo Russell and they were all like, oh, yeah, this will work. This Steph D'Lo combination will work, and then we'll get Klay back from injury, and we'll have the three of them. That was never going to work. Never did work. D'Lo was sent away to the Timberwolves halfway through the season. I think this has got a lot more chance of working with Chris Paul in place than what we're seeing with D'Angelo Russell. And I think in the short term, he's actually going to provide a better impact than Jordan Poole would have. Again, it just comes down to that safety net of knowing what you're going to get. And when you're in title contention, I think you really want that consistency and that experience brought to the floor rather than a young guy who's up and down like a yo-yo who could give you anything between 10 and 30 points. It's a bold move. There's no doubt about that. But I think ultimately it is the right move, not only for their chances to win next season, but to obviously open up financial flexibility moving forward. That's going to be it for me for this first episode of the podcast. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you tune in for more moving forward. This is also going to be uploaded to YouTube as well, but make sure you subscribe there or on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. And you can also follow me at POC252 on Twitter. Until next time.